Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hamilton Report. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, and I'm so happy to be with you all this evening. What a week we had last week. And I don't think any of us were prepared for some of the things that we saw last week. So I'm happy to be with you this evening, and I'm happy that you gave up a little time to spend here with me tonight because we've got a topic that I think is going to be interesting to you, and it's certainly one that's critically important. I've noticed so much that I've seen on social media in the last several days, where people are they're frustrated, they're elated, they're joyful, they're joyless. Um, just the emotions have truly been all over the place. And that's why I've invited to our broadcast this evening someone that I have long admired. We met the first time when we were sharing the podium at a rally, and then the second time, the third time, and the fourth time, and it was always a quick handshake, and then on from there. But I'm glad to know, or glad to say, that my guest tonight and I, over the last 6 months, a year, have gotten to know each other much better. And that's why it's important that he be with us this evening. And I hope that you will welcome with me our guest tonight, the pastor of East 6th Street Christian Church here in Oklahoma City, the Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr. Jesse, welcome to the Hamilton Report, sir.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Well, it's a busy week, and so for you to take the time to be here, it's really, I'm very much appreciative of that. Let's just look for a moment at some of the things that we saw last week. Let's start with Julius. Julius Jones, who we have talked about many, many times on this broadcast. There was great joy and dancing in the streets that the man was able to wake up the next day, that he has not been killed by the state.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for a lot of us, I think that joy was met with the realization that with the handcuffing that our governor did in this process, it makes it a very daunting task. At least he is still alive to fight, and I'm grateful for that. But I think that the reality is starting to sink in for folks, that, that there was so much cruelty around that. Would you speak to that, please?
Yes, sir. And everything else that happened that made that day kind of bittersweet. So many of us had worked for a long time to try to bring attention to this case and really study it to see what was so unjust about the entire process. And we were trying to say that about it. At the very least, he warranted a new trial with all of the discrepancies and all the things that have happened, and somebody just flat out confessing to having done it in three different times to three different people. This needed a new trial. But first it had to be to save his life. That was what we wanted. I'm not a proponent of the death penalty. I think it's cruel. I think it's unusual, and I think it's administered in an unequal and unfair way. So, but the cruelty to me was that our governor, I believe, actually knew a long time ago what his decision was going to be. And to keep Julius's mother and family and all of us, I mean, it was such an outpouring of relief from people, because I mean, we were literally invested in this thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And so we recognized the cruelty involved in waiting till the 11th hour to do that. And I think those are some of the tears that you saw from the supporters of Julius. I can't imagine how he felt or how his mother felt, having to wait all this time for something that could have been done a long time ago. I mean, if you appoint the majority of the people to the Pardon and Parole Board, you think you trust them enough to make that decision.
Right.
So, it was bittersweet.
Yes, it was, and we will take the joy that the gift is, and we will continue to fight there.
Yeah.
And then right after that, we were hit with the Rittenhouse verdict, and you were very eloquent on social media talking about the thing that you were most concerned about is that so many people were not surprised at that.
Yeah,
And that's a sad
yes, it
commentary
is.
on our society when it's just kind of a given that the young white boy who is not a boy, he's every bit a man because he makes manly decisions or adult decisions anyway. They're hardly manly, but it was almost like just a pro forma. Well, we have to do this thing for the public, so let's get it over with.
Yeah.
And now he walks free, and he's got tons of money that people have donated to him from Proud Boys on down. So, how do you explain that there was so little surprise there?
Well, number one, because it's not new. I mean, this has been going on a long time, and you can point to several examples a long time ago. But just in our modern era, if we just go back to Trayvon Martin
Mhm.
and we go back to the whole idea about Trayvon Martin, how Zimmerman called the police to report on him because it was a strange person in his neighborhood. And he told the police that he was going to follow them, and they explicitly told him not to do that. They explicitly did. And so here's a young man walking from the store to his father's house with a pop in one hand and Skittles in the other. And this dude is following him in a car. And I know since the very beginning what we've all told our children to do if somebody's fighting, if somebody's following you, and tries to grab you, kick, bite, scratch, fight, whatever you have to do. And this is what this man did for his life because he doesn't know who this is that's trying to, accost him and abduct him. And so the fact that George Zimmerman was able to claim self-defense after he stalked this young man and then attacked him, and then that flew in the face of the court. And so that was a modern day point that gave everybody kind of a frame of reference like, man, this justice system is still screwed up. We thought that we were doing better than this, but at this juncture in our nation's history. But evidently we're not. And then we continue to see it played out and out again. Rittenhouse, first of all, I don't know why his mother is not in trouble. She drove him from another state to get into something that had completely nothing to do with him. He jumped in that. So if I go to the zoo and then I jump in the tiger encagement, and then the tigers do what they got to do, I can't kill them in self-defense because I jumped in there.
Exactly.
I mean, it just made no sense to me. And it made no sense to people just watching, just common sense. And yet we saw a judge bending over backwards for that young man. I mean,
that part was, I swear, not even a pretense of
no,
being
no.
impartial in that.
The bigots have gotten brave in the last
Mhm.
5 years or so. And many things that people used to hide, they don't even worry about it anymore. They just come out with it because what's going to happen to them? It's been proven time and time again, nothing. And that's what's so disheartening about this. That's what makes people distrust the justice system and distrust authority even because we don't see things working out uh, the way that the majority of people believe that they ought to work out. It's just we're still victimized by this system, so that when things happen, if something happens that's in the affirmative, we're surprised by that.
And that it should never be that way, but it is,
No,
and with good reason, because as you just said, it's not a precedent of one thing; it's many things that cause people to say, "Wait a minute, this system is horribly broken,"
yes, it is.
and
Yes, it is.
yet here we deal with it day in and day out. I'd like what you were talking about, the bigots. For whatever reason, the last presidential administration gave people a license to say anything in any manner about anyone without without any strings attached. So for a long time, at least, and now of course we know that this is not true, but for a long time you could, I suppose, lull yourself into thinking that we were all doing better.
Yes,
But there was so much pent up rage and bias and bigotry. I mean, we see it in our own legislature, right
Yeah,
on the House floor. The things that are
yeah,
said should never be said in polite company
that's
or
right.
anywhere as far as that goes. But there is this feeling of invincibility that I don't understand how we can let it just go unchecked.
No, you know what? From the Oklahoma State House to the halls of Congress, with the gentleman uh, tweeting that video of him, of a cartoon of him killing another congressperson, and then after he was rebuked by the Congress, tweeting it again,
Yeah.
and then some of the things that have been said from the very floor of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, it just lets us know our last president played to the very worst of the United States. And the sad part is that he won. It's no longer of Friends. The Friends has become mainstream on that side.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how people think. It's no longer embracing the conspiracy theories. They don't deal in anything other than that. That has become their reality, and which is the part that's scary as heck, because those are the illusions. Those are things that are not there. And so I was trying to figure out, and I'm really kind of dealing with this, in sermon preparation for the coming week. But what are you mad about? What are you mad about? You can't say, and I think that a lot of the anger deals with, it's not that necessarily you're taking something from me, but I don't believe that you deserve what you're getting. I don't believe that you deserve what
Absolutely
you're
right.
getting. And I'm upset that you deserve what you get. It not that they would give me more, because understand, you being just as victimized by a certain class of folks in this nation as everybody else. They're just using you as a buffer between everybody else and them. And that goes back to colonial days and Bacon's rebellion, and the people wanted more land. Why did they want more land? Because the rich people owned it. Corporations own all that land. Well, in order to get that land, you had to go west of the Appalachian Mountains, which the governor of Virginia didn't want to do, because I don't want to incense the Native Americans that live there. We've already taken this land. We don't want to take any more. It's going to cause problems. Not that he was all benevolent. He just didn't want the problems that go with it.
Hmm.
And so you're going to burn a town down, burn his residence down, just so you can get the right to go over the mountains and do what you do. And you take a coalition of white, of black, free black and slave, and you all go over there and do that. And the rebellion has to be put down at some point, and it gets put down, but they don't put you to death, but they put everybody else to death.
Yeah.
And they treat you there because it's as racially stratified as we are. We are kind of social or economic stratified as well, and that plays, and that group that exists themselves from war while getting everybody else to fight. That group that victimizes everybody, but it fools one group into thinking that, hey, these people are taking something from you. Well, I never moved a job to Mexico or
Thank you.
Vietnam. I don't own the places to do that. But the people that do that are the folks that you should be angry at, but you're angry at me or people
And,
like me. It's
and that's
misdirected.
the thing. It's a huge mystery. I know people my age who are saying, well, by God, I paid off my student loans and they can too. Well, first of all, when I was going to college, there's no way you could have racked up $250,000 in student
That's right.
loans. It just wasn't that way. So stop trying to pretend that you pulled yourself up by the bootstraps. And what difference does it make whether you paid yours off or someone else paid it off for you? How does that impact the life of a 26-year-old person today who has great mounted debt with a master's degree and no hope of home ever owning a home because they'll never get out from under that.
That's right.
So it's
Scott,
it's
you
all
know, I
broken.
paid mine off a few years ago, and you just pay forever. You think you're going to pay forever, and then one day they send you a piece of paper that says that it's paid off. That had no impact on anybody else. I'm not mad because I had to pay mine off, and somebody may have gotten help to pay theirs off. That has nothing to do with me. That doesn't concern me in the least bit. It was my debt. I had to pay it, and I did it. The idea that we're upset for somebody else getting the blessing of doing something, and you're absolutely right. We do this generational thing. I did mine. You got to do yours. Well, it's like when years ago when congregations began to get vans to go pick up kids. And then, people would say, well, we didn't have a van when I was a kid. Well, that's because everybody lived up the street or around the corner.
Yes.
You didn't need a van for that. Now that everything is so spread out, you got people on the other side of town that you're trying to bring in. Circumstances has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my God, we couldn't go to school for what we went to school for back then. I mean, for the same amount, we couldn't do that because
No.
times change.
Right.
And when times change, you have to adjust to those change. And look, I mean, I'm not one to say, well, hey, I beat cancer. You got to beat cancer too. I hope you get it so you can beat it because I beat it. And what kind of sense does that make? I mean,
that's the point, though. You're talking about real life situations that are nonsensical.
yes.
How do we begin to break out of that so that so that we can regain some kind of traction moving forward for everyone? Because we have regressed. We have regressed so much. When I think about how much ground we lost in 4 years, it's horrifying. But I'm not about to be naive enough to say, oh, well, that's where it started. It didn't start there. It started before this nation was ever a concept. Yeah. And it's just gotten worse. So let me, having said all of that, how do you, as a Black man, as a leader, as a teacher, as a pastor, how do you reckon with the environment in which you have to live?
I'm trying to make sure that I dot my I's and cross my T's. I have been harassed and stopped and done things crazy, had people discriminate against me, and I have not been in a position to defend myself years ago. And then I said, well, that was one of the reasons I stopped drinking, because I can't open my mouth and I got alcohol all on my breath and talk about how you mistreated me. And so that's one of the reasons I stopped drinking, just for that reason, to try to shut some of that down. But I always try to make sure I do the right thing. And I'm trying to encourage young people to do the right thing. It's kind of like the situation with Julius. The first deal is to survive the stop. Just survive the stop. We can deal with whatever else we need to deal with. But you're doing all that, but you're also trying to preach systemic change and trying to get the systems to change. If you can change the systems, then and you change the policies, then you begin to make some headway. But I really think, Scott, it's going to take a psychiatrist, to help us do this. And I'm serious when I say that these people have abandoned logic and reality, many of them, and they live in a world that does not exist. And I don't know how you reason with people who have made up their mind that you're lying about everything. A friend, sent a Facebook post the other week saying that the CEO of Pfizer had been arrested by the federal government. I was like, boy, I missed that news. So I started trying to research it. And then there's a page of saying how that's false. And so I go on my friend's page to let them know, hey, you may have made a mistake, because I saw that that's a false thing. But I find out 3 or 4 people had beat my friend to that, beat me to that. And I said, okay. But then I read her response to what she's saying to that, all these people are lying. And I'm like, I mean, everybody from Fox to MSNBC and the Christian Science Monitor and the Wall Street, everybody's lying. All these news organizations. I mean, so I can't reason with you because you seem to be detached from reality. And I honestly believe that it's going to take a psychologist or a psychiatrist to help us do this, because this is something on the inside of them that I think is beyond us reasoning with. I hate to be that gloom and doom, but I don't know, Scott.
That's about as honest an answer as anyone could give, because I don't either. Obviously, elections matter, and who we vote to
Yeah,
represent us, that's one way to create systemic change. But what you and I are talking about here is something on a more granular level. It's something within the hearts of people that, because I will tell you, in my family, I've lost by marriage. I've lost two cousins who were murdered,
mhm.
an uncle who was murdered. Someone traveled from out of state to kill a black man,
Oh wow.
and he's dead. Okay, I. But that does not mean that I can put myself in the position of a black man in America in 2021. I can't do it. No matter how much I may empathize with you, I will never know what it's like to be driving home at night and see those red and blue lights behind me and wonder if I'm ever going to make it home again.
Yeah.
So these are things that I don't know how people do it day in and day out and continue to strive to fight for another day. How do you manage as a forgetting your leadership role for a moment? How do you deal with the stress of just being a black man today?
Well, of course, I lean on my faith in this, and again, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right things. I want to make sure that I can. I'm not the one that should have to de-escalate, but I have to do what I have to do to survive, to stop as well, and that's what I pray for everybody else. And I'm seriously, I'm praying for hearts and attitudes. I need me to act right so I don't lose my temper with folks and do right, but and do the wrong thing. But I'm praying for people to begin to change, and that's why I public speak and go and do workshops and things like that, because I'm trying to plant a seed in somebody that may be leaning the other way, and let them know that we have to begin to consider other people in our lives and consider what benefits other people. And everything does not have to benefit us. Everything is not about us. And so everything good that happens to somebody else is not bad for us. And I think that's kind of where we did, we're locked into such a selfishness that we don't want anybody else to be blessed. We don't want anybody else to have anything, as if it means that they're taken away from us. But it's really like lighting somebody else's candle. You can light somebody else's candle without losing your flame. And I
Oh, I
don't think
love
that
that.
we realize that people certainly don't practice that. But I that's what I try to tell people, and I want people to understand that anything that happens to me for good is not necessarily affecting you. That's not how life works.
Mhm.
That's not how life works. And we can be good together because I ought to want for you what I want for me. And so I'm not trying to be in competition with you, and I don't think we need to be in some kind of racial competition one way or the other. If even if it's getting in a battle about who suffered more, or anything like that. But I think things should benefit all of us. We have work to do, and all of us
And,
are suffering. And I want everybody to understand that the people that are doing the pressing, they don't necessarily look one way, but they're operating a machine, and the machine is doing this work against us, and this is what must be overcome. And it's going to take all of us to do that. We need
you-
allies. Everybody needs allies.
of course
Everybody
we do.
needs allies.
But you you said something very profound there. My husband has long said that for many people in this country, it doesn't matter how poor you are, it doesn't matter how little you have, as long as there's someone behind you with less, you're okay. And that's the change that we have to create in people, because like you said, we're not all going to have the same thing.
That's right.
But why can't we want the best for everyone, for each other?
That's
That's not such a hard concept. Those are things that we learned in kindergarten.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a hard concept, but we have just gotten into this selfish, kind of greedy phase where I'm the only one. I'm the only one that I want with the ability to do this. And the illustration I gave about the cartoon in my sermon yesterday, and I think we've all seen this thing of the three boys, and they're peering behind this fence. One of them's tall enough to see over the fence, just standing up. One of them had to stand on a box. One of them had to stand on two boxes. And that's what justice looks like. That's what love looks like. Everybody gets the opportunity to look over there, the opportunity to do good. I mean, you're not guaranteed an equal outcome, but just equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, and there's another cartoon, a companion one, where they're all standing on the ground, and the only one they can see is the one that's tall enough. And that's equity on a certain Darwinian level. Everybody's equal, nobody's on the boxes, but don't people need to be on the boxes? And what would it hurt you for somebody to be on the boxes to be able to see? I personally don't think that it's good to have as many people left out of the process on the bottom. That's how revolutions start. When people think that they're left out of the process and they're on the bottom, they have nowhere to go but up. And a lot of times that upward mobility at that time gets violent. And we just want people, and this is a hard thing, Scott. It's a heart, HEART kind of thing. We need people to really begin to search their hearts and look at why I feel the way that I do. Why does this threaten me? Anything that you don't like, or anything that comes up that you may have had apprehension about, ask how that threatens you. I mean, I have to do that. I mean, I've grown on a number of issues, a whole lot of issues. I'm like, how does that affect me? Is that my business? That's a good question to ask. And I ask that all the time because I want to make sure that I tend to my business and not stay in everybody else's. How does this affect me? Is this my business? Because if it's just somebody else just living their life, they need to live their life. And I think that's why we've gotten in so many issues with, as they call them, the Karens and other people. Let people live their lives. How's it affecting you? Leave them alone. If somebody's reading or sleeping or what, leave them alone. That's
Can you
a basic
imagine?
right.
That I'll tell you, if we could just do that, if we could just start right there, so much would change.
Yes, sir.
My brother, I'm sorry we are about out of time, and I did not intend to put a nice bow on this broadcast because instead there's so much more to talk about,
Yes.
to think about, and I'm going to ask you to please come back and spend some more time with us so that we can really start to explore with our viewers more of a way that each of us has to do a self checklist of
Yes.
things that not just our motivations, but also, and I love this. Our chair, Alicia Andrews, and I were talking last week, and she said we all need to do a privilege inventory because we all have privilege in some area. And I had never really thought about that, but that was good advice. And so I'm going to ask you to come back soon, and we'll have an opportunity to talk further about this. But you've really begun a great dialogue here, and I thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I appreciate it. I'll be glad to come by.
And I'll look forward to seeing you again real soon.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, folks, like I said, this is only the beginning of broadening out this discussion. There is so much that each one of us can do. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it just seems overwhelming. Like, where do I start? How do I get started? Or can I really make a difference? And I can tell you that a difference is made one person at a time, one heart at a time. And so please take this not as a moment to despair, but instead as a moment to recognize that we all have work to do and that we all can play a key part in doing that work. Finally, before we leave tonight, I just want to say how appreciative I am that you spent some time with us. And if you watch this broadcast after the live airing, you're also, please, I would encourage you to share this broadcast as well. But I thank you for being with us. And this week, for some, it's Thanksgiving week. For some, it's Native American Heritage celebrations. For some, it's just a matter of gathering together for a big meal. And for others, it's a week of rest. But whatever it is, I hope that you are safe and well. And most of all, that in the midst of whatever plans are going on with you or around you, that you will take just a little time for some self-care. Because as we head into the holidays, full tilt, we're also full tilt into election season. So take care of yourself. You matter. I appreciate you. And I appreciate all of the folks at Oklahoma who really, truly are trying to make this a better place to live for us and for future generations. From all of us here at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, and certainly the Hamilton Report, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for being with us, and thank you again to my guest, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Good night.